Why Do You Podcast? Een podcastreeks waarin podcasters vertellen over waarom ze podcasten. Ik ben Annelies, ik ben podcastmanager en coach en ik ga in gesprek met podcastmakers uit België, Nederland en ver daarbuiten om hen te vragen naar hun why als het over podcasten gaat. Je ontdekt in deze reeks dat iedereen een eigen reden heeft om te podcasten en along the way krijg je ook heel veel tips en inspiratie om met je eigen podcast aan de slag te gaan. Luister je mee? Hello Nicole, welcome to my show. Why Do You Podcast?
I'm really excited to have a conversation about podcasting and why people do it. And I hope that I have something to add.
Well, yeah, I'm expecting you to, because we're going to talk mostly about why you podcast. So, but let's start with introducing yourself and your podcast. So, what's the title of your podcast? What do you talk about? What do you do?
Yeah. So my name is Nicole Trick Steinbach, and I sound like an American. I was born in the United States. I was educated in the United States, and then I went to Germany and became an adult. And I lived in Germany for 13 years. That's where I built my career in technology. It's where I had my children, got my first mortgage, got married, all the big things. So I think like a German. And I sound like an American. Now I live back in the United States, and I'm, crafting a life in between the two countries. My podcast is also what I do. So it's called Build Your Brave Career, and I help women in tech build their brave career.
Yeah.
So what that means is that we work together one-on-one in a coaching environment for their career so that they stress less. And then they begin to overproduce less, so work less. And then over time, they begin to earn more. And that is the exact same promise that I attempt to meet with my podcast as well.
Yeah. Okay. So what are the typical topics that you would discuss?
Yeah. So I have 5 different seasons now, I believe. I think it's 5. 160 something episodes
Wow,
as we record this. Yeah. And so it's gone through a lot of maturation because I started my podcast originally to meet a very specific need. So women in technology, we have had the same most common emotional word to describe our experience in our careers, and that word is lonely. And I know that for myself, when I was still in corporate tech, I was still traveling a lot. I was climbing the ladder into the executive rungs. I cried a lot in the bathroom. There was a lot of crying in the bathroom. And I didn't have to worry about anyone walking in because I was like, it was just me. It was me in my bathroom, right?
Yeah.
And as I transitioned into running my own business, I thought, one of the reasons I stopped crying in bathrooms and I started standing up for myself, and why I stopped internalizing the nonsense that women in technology, of course, were dismissed, of course, were passed over, of course, were stressed out, was because I started to share my story and I started to hear the story from other women in tech. So I thought, okay, let's see if crafting a podcast that shares the stories of women in tech would be supportive for my community, but also be energizing for me. So that's why I started it. So the first season is really a lot of storytelling, very limited advice, very limited best practices. And I built a following. And I asked, right? Because in technology, we talk about getting user feedback and incrementally changing. And so I did that. And so that brought us to season 2. Season 3 is where I went really deep into best practice frameworks for building the skill of bravery so that you can work less, you can stress less, and you can begin to earn more. So that was really season 3. And then I started welcoming some of my clients on to share their stories. And so it's become this act of service. Podcast episodes are basically every week. I take a few weeks off here and there between seasons just so that I can cleanse my palate and come back fresh and excited. where women in technology share a piece of concrete career advice. They share a brave story in their career, and that can be anything from saying yes or saying no, taking a promotion, refusing a promotion, relocating internationally, shifting functions. It can be all kinds of stuff. And also suggestions, insights, tips that I offer as a former executive, as a current consultant. So I do some contracting on the side, and a coach who's coaching women all over the world.
Yeah.
So that is, and they can be between, I looked this up, and I think the longest one was almost an hour, which
All
was really,
right.
really
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
And when I'm speaking by myself, it's usually around 10 to 12 minutes with the intro, outro, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I notice with most podcasts, there is a difference between the solo episodes that are usually very short, and then with the guest, you have a bit of a longer conversation. I guess like that's totally normal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nicer to feed off of each other, right? Like
Yeah.
to share and exchange
Yeah.
versus I don't really enjoy listening to myself talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but I think it's also really a good idea to offer your listeners the choice, because sometimes they might not have a lot of time to listen to a long episode, but then you'll also have your shorter ones that they can listen to.
Yeah.
So yeah, you give them the choice, and the offer is there, and they can just pick and choose whatever they feel like, and how much time they have at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially for some of the women in my community, there's a really strong, we've all been indoctrinated to compare and contrast. And sometimes the stories can pull up a bunch of like perfectionism, insecurity, imposter, etc. in the listener. And so some people just skip that because they're in a situation where they're stressed out. They just found out they're not getting the promotion, or they're headed into a layoff. And the last thing that they want to hear is something that's going to make them compare. So
Yeah.
they'll come back to those later to be inspired,
Yeah.
right? And I talk on my podcast, I talk to more senior women because that's who I work with. There's so many beautiful podcasts out there for like entry level women in tech, or entry level dev, entry level consulting. And I really talk to that piece where, you have 5+ years of experience. Working really hard doesn't cut it anymore. Right? Being really good at your job does not get you moving ahead in your career. And so that's what I try to gift through the individual episodes, are
Yeah.
really concrete insights or how-tos to shift out of a situation that a more senior woman would be facing.
Yeah. Yeah. But still, I think it's good that you focus on a specific group of the more experienced professional women, but yeah, the ones at entry level might also feel that your episodes are really inspiring, and might stop them from making the same mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's funny because so I volunteer with a few women in tech groups, either as a facilitator or a member myself, an organizer. And the entry level women frequently will say to me, "Oh, I loved that conversation with so and so." Right. And then they'll say, "But I don't understand what you're talking about in the individual sessions." And I'm like, "Oh, that makes
Okay.
sense. That totally makes
Yeah.
sense because I'm not talking to you and you haven't
Yeah.
faced some of those situations yet.
Yeah.
Come back in 2 years." Yeah.
Yeah. So you should take that as a compliment then.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
get much feedback. I'm really
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to get more feedback
Mm-hmm.
um from my audience and from my community that surrounds it. But when I do get feedback, it's just so encouraging and supportive and really specific too. So I had a few episodes, more than a few. I had, I think, 15 episodes where I was just answering questions that had come in more than once from
Yeah.
community members. That was really exciting.
Yeah.
It's so nice to be in an asynchronous dialogue. And I will say, I completely misunderstood, or I think it was more, I did not even consider the power of that asynchronous, long term, sustained engagement and dialogue with people that I've never met before.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you think about it. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
also really amazing, but I still, even if this is going to be episode 111, and I still think it's weird. Yeah.
Wait a second. My podcast is going to be 111.
Yeah.
That is so cool. My
Yeah.
11 is my number. I
Really?
have had the number 11 since I was the littlest of things. One year I even paid someone to swap softball numbers with
To get
me,
the
so I
11?
would have 11 on the back. I'm so excited.
All
That
right.
feels
And
really
that is
exciting.
all because they go, well, my episodes go live in the order of recording. So you are actually only number 111 because I had a headache last week when we were supposed to do the recording.
I
So
knew
you
it was
moved
happening.
up in the list.
I am so excited. I'm
Yeah.
so excited by that.
It was meant to be. My headache had a reason. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, that feels so good. Okay. Anyways,
That's
back to the
really
point.
cool. No, I always think it's really cool when people react to their episode number like this because it's happened before, and it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
they say there is no coincidence. So yeah,
I agree. I
yeah.
agree.
All right, cool. Yeah, and also, yeah, I just want to say I think it's really cool what you do with the podcast, but also as a coach and mentor, because I worked in tech also for 20 years, but in the HR department. So basically, yeah, job wise, nothing to do with technology, but you do work in a
Yeah.
tech corporate environment, yeah, with a lot of male energy. So even in the women, because in HR we were almost all women, but still the male energy can go really high because they all feel like they have to prove something. So
That's true.
so
And
yeah,
I did the same thing. Oh, I
yeah,
did 100% the same thing.
yeah,
Almost got me fired at one point,
yeah,
which is when I discovered coaching. And that's actually, so that's my little subversive undercurrent of what I do. Because when people say to me, oh, I'm not a developer, I'm not an implementation consultant, I'm like, okay, that's cool. What do you do? Oh, I'm in HR. Okay, cool. How do you do your job? You sign into an application that you have to involve with. You have to review the data. You have to make sure you've got your
yes,
automations going. Congrats, you're a woman in technology.
yeah,
And that's what I love. So I've had clients all the way from corporate strategy, chief of staff for one
yeah,
of Fortune, I think it was a Fortune 500 company, all the way to the end of the life cycle, which is customer support, right? Everything in between, someone who's doing auditing for a tech company, for a mid-sized tech company, HR, marketing, et cetera. Now, I do have to say, I have never taken on like a core HR client, like an HRBP,
mm-hmm.
HRD, et cetera, just because I don't have any professional experience with that. And I truly believe that anytime myself, yourself, anyone listening to this invests in a coach, they deserve to have someone who is, yes, certified as a coach, but also has real world experience.
Yeah.
Dare I say scars
Yeah.
from whichever function they did.
Yeah.
And I do organizational change management and communications as my core function. And I ran projects, global projects in every single division. And HR was the one area where I truly stepped into a orchestration calibration kind of role, because HR is so, first of all, data governance, data privacy, personnel information,
Yeah.
right? It is such an expert role from a project and programs perspective that I, generally speaking, if someone comes to me and is a core HR role, I'm like, I know 2 amazing coaches who could be fantastic for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's still what you say is true, but I was in learning and development, so I also did not get any of the data and privacy stuff, and
Yeah.
legal stuff. I basically have no idea. I know about training and coaching and personal development, but yeah, we did work with some coaches, external coaches within the company, and one of them was also had a background in industrial engineering, and that was appreciated a lot by those more technical
That's right.
profiles, because she could relate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard a pretty sad story. And you can decide if you want to send this, but I heard a really sad story where someone who is working in a tech implementation development kind of role was working with a career coach who didn't know what Scrum was.
Yeah.
And if you don't know
Then
what Scrum is,
yeah,
you cannot help someone create, design, implement their career goal if you don't understand the foundation of how work is done.
Yeah.
And I think it's just really important that we enjoy the expertise that we have and we allow other people to enjoy the expertise they have.
Yeah. Yeah, totally true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the podcast. Why is it that you choose to do the podcast? Because your mission is clear, but why did you choose the podcast as the vehicle or the medium to do it?
So I had to think back and try to remember because it's been like 160 some episodes, right? And I believe it was because I really want to have larger scale conversations. I really want to share what's been shared with me and what I have earned through, tough knocks. And I don't want to travel all the time. So I'm an awesome presenter. I'm a fantastic facilitator. I am hired to do both of those. And I actually really enjoy going to conferences and retreats. I enjoy even more my 2 children that I only have in my house for 5 and 7 years more.
Yeah.
Also, COVID really changed how work gets done. So yes, I have worked virtually, globally, remotely since 2009. So I know how to do it. And there's something beautiful there about a scaled conversation that can support someone in the point of time. Recently, with all of these layoffs, a really early episode suddenly got 20 hits. And I was like, that is weird. Like, first of all, the quality is weird. The storytelling is weird, right? Like, I'm all over the place. Why is this going out? And it was because I was talking about those first couple of hours after a layoff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so someone who's in my community sent it to their people and said, "Hey, I know that you're going through this." And then those people shared it, etc. That is a point in time where I get to be of service to people I've never met, maybe never will get to meet. I hope that I meet them, right? But may never meet in what they're experiencing right now, as opposed to constantly making up a new story, a new whatever, right? It can be reused and reused and reused in an act of service. So I'm pretty sure that's why I started doing a podcast. I was really surprised. I heard some podcasters speaking recently that there's like some business coach thing that happens sometimes where someone will say, "Oh, you should make a podcast," and it'll just fly off the shelves.
Yeah.
I've never been told that. I never had that understanding. So for me, that was really surprising because I was like, wait a second. It's a lot of work to put up a podcast.
Yeah.
You've got, depending on the complexity of the theme, anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes to prepare. Then you got to record the thing, which is never a straight shot. I don't know, but for me, it never is. I'm stuttering. I forget what I want to say. My dog starts barking. My kid knocks on the, right? And then you got to edit it. Now, I outsource my editing, but you got to edit it. Then you got to listen to it again to make sure it made sense. Then you got to publish it. Then you got to market it. You got show note. It is not something that you just throw together and throw out. I mean, you can do that,
You can, yeah.
but I mean,
yeah,
quality.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever spent less than 5 hours on a half an hour episode.
Yeah.
I just don't think I have.
No. Yeah, me neither. Although this one, Why Do You Podcast? I mean, I couldn't have got to 111 episodes if I wanted it to be really perfect. So I've let go of a lot of perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
Also because this podcast for me is it feels more like a hobby, and I have another podcast to actually support my business and the marketing of my business. And there I do spend a lot more time in preparing and editing and stuff like that. Because for this one, yeah, you can just, if you have a podcast, you can book your slots for a recording. I don't do any preparation, any research. So basically, we go into this conversation. I know nothing about you or your podcast, unless sometimes I do, of course, because I do listen to a lot of podcasts. So there is a chance that I already know it. But yeah, but yeah. So it depends on I guess also your the goal you set for your podcast and what you want to achieve with it. But I do agree with you. The quality has to be, well, not perfect, but it has to be good. Yeah.
Has to
So
be at least decent,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I recently had a conversation with someone who I was sharing with them, like, listen, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, you got to be really clear on who you want to serve. You got to be really clear about what you want the outcome to be. And it can change. Like mine has changed over time, right? But it can change, but you got to be clear. And then, I was sharing like for 4 hours, and this person, I love the Germans. Okay. I lived in Germany for a very long time. And the German was like, but the quality of yours is not that good. And I was like, oh, interesting. So what are you comparing me to? And it was like Diary of a CEO,
Oh yeah.
The Huberman, some other happiness, 10% happiness or something. And I was like, okay, thank you. I love that you think that what I have to say has so much value. But I would just share with you that Diary of the CEO, I believe that they talk for 3 hours. There are
Well, usually it's 1 hour. It's between 1 hour, 1 and 2 hours usually, because that's when I love to listen to. But yeah,
but
Stephen Bartlett has I don't even know how many people he has on his team, but there's a lot. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
the full conversation
Yeah.
gets distilled down into an
Yeah.
hour or two, but they talk
Yeah.
for 3 hours plus.
Yeah.
And then that gets edited down. And there's at least 7 different professionals working on that, right?
Yeah.
Research, prep, the outline, then the
Yeah.
editing later. So I was like, thank you so much. But like an episode of the Diary of the CEO is probably 20 hours of work from
At
experts.
least I would.
Probably,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's just something also like, who are you comparing yourself to? Are you comparing yourself to a pineapple? And you are a summer rose? I mean, that doesn't work, right? So if I listen to the Diary CEO and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I can't get my guests to say such brilliant things. Well, okay, yeah, but like I talk to them for an hour and it gets edited down to half an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, you can never compare. I was just I actually I'm almost at the end. But I'm reading 10x is easier than 2x right now, Dan Sullivan. Um and he also says that in the book, and you cannot compare yourself to other people. You can only compare yourself to the person you were yesterday or last month or last year or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, and I get this asked a lot as a podcast manager. I think it's one of the most frequently asked questions, especially for new podcasters when they've just launched the podcast. It's then they ask me, I have this number of downloads. Is that good?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, yeah. I mean, anything more than just your mother and your best friend is good when you're just starting out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you cannot compare because it's your unique podcast and it all depends on your niche and on yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in full transparency, I would love, like for me, I would be so wow when 150 people were following my podcast. I don't have that right now. Okay. However, I always remind myself if I walked into a room and 30 people had been sitting there waiting for me to show up, I would be over the moon.
Yeah.
Like that to me is so exciting. And I also, when I start to get a little bit like grumpy about it, and I'm a little entitled, like, this is so good, listen to it, right? I think back to the time when the technical platform I was on at the time, they just had a little data hiccup, and all of a sudden 2 zeros got added to one of my episodes. So it suddenly looked like, I think, not 150 downloads, it was like 1,500 downloads.
Oh,
And I was like,
party.
"Whoa!" So I, like, clickety clicked on that, and then it jumped up to 15,000, and I felt sick to my stomach, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's going viral.
Yeah.
This is not what I want. I am not in business to go viral. I'm not in business to become an influencer." And and then I also was just like, "Oh my god, am I in trouble?" Right? And then I got in and I was like, "Ah!" And I, like, walked away from my desk, and I was so nervous. And then I got an email that was like, "Hey, there was a data error. We fixed everything. Don't worry
Okay.
about it. There were just a 0." And so sometimes I really remind myself of that. Like, I'm in this to be of service to my community.
Yeah.
And that means that I have senior, I have nuanced, I have messy conversations. I'm not selling or suggesting there is a simple one size fits all for everyone. So I'm not going for 150 downloads or 150,000 downloads. I'm going for quality to the right people who I love enough to do all the nonsense of having a podcast for.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that I love that. Yeah, that's totally how I feel about it too. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's quality over quantity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have well, actually I have no idea how many followers or exact downloads I have right now because I changed to another podcast host and it doesn't get the download data from Spotify. And I know most of my listeners listen on Spotify, so that data is just not there. Of course, I can log on to my Spotify for Podcasters account and go check there, but yeah, that's an extra thing to do. So
Yeah.
I'll do that once every couple of months or something just to check. But yeah, what I see now in my podcast hosts is not that much because it's only people listening on Apple and all the other smaller apps. But in Belgium, Spotify is the biggest listening app, so that data is just not there.
Mhm.
So yeah, but yeah, I really don't care that much about the numbers, and they don't have to be high. As long as I reach the right people, then I'm happy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah. All right. So yeah. Is there anything, because you give a lot with your podcast and you help a lot of people, is there anything that you have received in return or that maybe you've learned from doing the podcast?
Wow. So I'm definitely becoming better at interviewing. That has been that's been helpful. And not interviewing towards choosing someone for a job, but like interviewing to share their story. Because one of the things that I say to every guest is, this is not CNN. This is not RTL, the European
Yeah.
version, right?
Yeah.
This is a podcast. We can edit anything, and I'm here to make you shine. Like, I'm here for your story to help other people. So that has been something that's been really helpful for me in my day-to-day experience with, my kids' teachers and my friends and suppliers and things like that. So that's been helpful. I think that the thing that personally has it's not that I don't have experience with this, but it's done in a different way, is longevity comes in small steps. It's something that I learned through running. So I've been a runner since I was 12 years old. And some days showing up for a run is enough. You're not going to run your best. Maybe it's really hot, maybe it's really cold, but you show up and that's enough. That's great. And then allowing the 2% improvement over time becomes a dramatically different skill level, output, impact. I listened to I don't know why I did this to myself, but I did. I listened to one of the first 10 episodes I ever put out a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, I'm going to pull this down. This is so embarrassing. I'm going to pull this down. And I was like, Nicole, you talk about bravery as a skill and you talk about the joy of failure and how learning is a spiral and we're always, moving one way or the other way. And that we get to look back at ourselves and compare, like you said, to ourselves and be like, wow, look at how far I've come. So I had to talk myself off the ledge and say, Nicole, you leaving it out there means, right, that you're role modeling what it is that you tell people. Because now when I listen to my episodes, there's just so much more heart. There's so much more clarity. There's so much more purpose. And so I just believe very deep in my heart that then the impact is significantly bigger as well. And that's a reminder for me that the 2% sustained consistency is what makes dreams come true.
Yeah. That's a nice one. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one to frame.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you are you are yeah, you bring a very well thought through story, and your mission is very clear, and you tell it well. Have you ever thought of writing a book?
Oh, so I actually am a published author.
Oh,
I
you have
also wrote a
already. Okay.
column. Yeah, so it's not a book, but in a variety of different areas. And I did communications for a number of years inside of corporations. And yeah, that comes up a lot with people. And honestly, right now, one of the things okay, so I grew up very poor. I haven't shared this yet. I grew up very poor. And I grew up with a lot of lack and a lot of scarcity and a lot of, oh, that isn't for me. And thankfully, I got to go to college. I had to work multiple jobs to make myself through, graduated, and then I got the chance and I left at the chance to move to Germany. And in Germany and Europe, period, I think, they just grab you by the butt and they shove you into the middle class. And then they just solder everything closed behind you, right? And so the pathway from little girl with a single mom and a stutter with a lot of financial lack and opportunity lack to a global executive in a corporate tech company comes with ruthless prioritization. Ruthless. And so at this stage of my life, like I mentioned, I have 2 kids. I have them
Yeah.
for a few years each where they live in my house. I'm running a business. I have a dog so that I get up from my desk and I take walks, and I live in
Yeah.
Colorado and it's essentially mandatory. And I love travel and I love reading. And so anything above and beyond that is for when my heart is in it.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and so there have been times when I've thought, my kids go to German school on Saturdays. That's when I do the majority of my podcast preparation and organization and things like that. And I thought, this Saturday, I really don't want to do that. Am I still in it for my podcast? And as long as the answer is still yes, then I keep going.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just have to get through the muck. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are
Sometimes, but
definitely.
sometimes you can. Yeah. It's like you said with the running, and sometimes it's hard, but then you show up also in your podcast for your listeners. But if you really feel that your heart is not in it anymore, it's also okay to quit, of course. Yeah.
That's right. And anyone who is like, oh no, I can't quit. Quittering is for losers. I offer to you the book Quit by Annie Duke.
All right. I don't know that one, but yeah, that sounds good, because I think because your general topic is bravery, I think quitting is very brave. Yeah.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And I would guess that over half of my one-on-one clients actually need to quit something really important.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a relationship, sometimes it's trying to please a boss, sometimes it's their function. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's quitting is a skill for the brave for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. So, not that the talking about quitting is maybe a bit of a weird connection to the next question, because I'm going to ask you about blunders or bloopers, and quitting is not a blunder, but or a blooper. But you must have had some in 5 seasons of your podcast, yeah?
Ooh, yes.
Something really
Most.
funny that happened, or yeah, some big mistake that you learned from, yeah.
Okay, I don't have something funny. I there probably are some funny things. Okay, here's a funny thing. I'm a public speaker. I've spoken spontaneously ad hoc. There was a technical issue, and suddenly I'm in front of thousands of my employer's customers, and I'm just riffing while they're trying to fix the technical issue. Okay, so I'm a public speaker. And yet, every time I have a guest on my podcast, even if I've known them for over a decade, I screw up their name every time. And it gets edited out every time. Every time. I called one of my really good friends by her maiden name, and she'd been married for like 15 years. It's just crazy every time, every time. But I would say the biggest blunder, like an actual error that I made, and I'm still working through what I want to do about this, but I had a theme I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about no in November and yes in December. And I wanted to have people on who had something really powerful to say. So I was asking around and I got some recommendations and I had a few conversations. And there was one person in November and there was one person in December. And I didn't do enough research into their core beliefs, um, what they think about feminism, what they think about transgender humans, how they actually run whatever their service is in the world. And that was a real mistake, because if anyone is in my space and wants to stay in my space, they're going to, just like I have to, continuously learn about my own internalized bigotry, right? My way that I have been homophobic or transphobic or Islamophobic or whatever, right? Like
Mhm.
we're constantly learning how to be a slightly better person. And unfortunately, on my podcast, I have two guests who one of them is a part of this fundamental Christian faith,
Mm.
which I'm not I'm not against. Do you, boo? It's just not in my spaces. Is it okay to proclaim widely that you're going to hell if you don't believe that specific faith?
Yeah.
And the other person has a very complex and very difficult to understand charging model with absolutely no refunds. And that is something that for me, I just don't agree with.
Yeah.
And so I wish that I had done the conversations themselves are quality, right? But it's having given a platform that I would not have given had I done a little more research.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you thinking of taking those episodes down, or because
Yes. So yeah.
you could what actually one of my clients does that is, because she interviews a guest on every episode, and she also doesn't always agree with beliefs or things that the guest says. But she puts a disclaimer in the show notes to say that she doesn't necessarily agree with everything that the guest says. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've had people come on and we had a great pre-conversation. And then we get into the actual recording and they cannot stop selling.
Yeah.
Or they say something that, because human rights for all is so easy to say. It's actually simple, but it's difficult to live. It is really, really difficult to live. And we need to confront that for ourselves, but we also need to have people who are willing to have the really important conversations with us, right? And so I've interrupted 2 recordings and just said, actually, you know what? This is not going to continue.
Yeah.
I am unwilling to continue this conversation and definitely not give you a platform. There have also been, I think 3, I could be getting that wrong, where I recorded it all the way through and I went back and listened. I was like, this person literally gave absolutely no value other than come buy my thing, my software as a service or my coaching package or whatever. And so I just haven't published. And I have that. Like, I hold the right to just not publish your episode. And I've
Yeah,
explained
you
to people
do.
why that's
Yeah.
not happening. For these 2, there's for the one, I have a mentoring conversation, I think next week, where I'm just going to go over a couple of things. And this is one of them, because for the person who is a part of a high control religion, I'm pretty sure, I'm like 90% sure that I'm just going to take it down. And for the other person, it's a really interesting tension, right? Because unfortunately, I exist in 2 industries, the coaching industry and the tech industry. And there's no governance and controls that matter in the coaching industry. And sadly, a lot of people do, I would not say the majority, but a big enough slice of my quote unquote colleagues just do really crappy things.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't want to be a part of platforming that. So
Yeah.
it's something that I'm continuing to work through, but that's definitely something that was a real mistake. It was a real error on my part that I have put into place. So I don't accept guest pitches for my podcast. I just don't.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If I don't reach out, it's not happening.
Yeah.
I have that on my website. People still send me the worst pitches in the world. But that's, that's for me. And I also focus on women in tech. Men have many, 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 many platforms. And so I'm just going to platform women in tech,
Yeah.
talking to women in tech. So, and I have some men that listen and they send me fantastic emails. In fact, I get more emails from men than I do from women. But, we need to have spaces where we're elevating each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, it's your podcast, your rules, you decide. Yeah. I think, yeah, the decent thing to do is, yeah, just let them know if you're not going to publish it or if you're going to take it down, because I've been ghosted once as a guest, so, and then you do spend your time for the recording and the conversation, and even if you're only a guest, you don't maybe have to do a lot of research or preparation, but you still spend your time doing the recording and having the conversation. So, and then they say, I will let you know when the episode is published, and then you never hear from them again. And I'm like, what just happened? Yeah. So
That is disappointing.
it's okay if you decide not to publish it. But yeah, just let people know. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It's not that hard. Yeah. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I don't either.
Yeah.
But I've been a part of layoffs, and that was horrible. So
Yeah,
telling
yeah,
someone
yeah.
that their half an hour podcast conversation is no longer live is not a big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're almost at the end. I have one more question for you, and that's also one that I ask everyone. What is the most important ingredient for a good podcast for you?
So for me, it's the exact same thing to running a business. And it's a piece of advice that I got from someone that I really look up to. And she also has a podcast. Her name is Cami Gildner. And she said to me, when you're thinking about starting a business, ask yourself, who do you love enough to do all of the mess that is running a business for. So who do you love enough to do marketing for? Who do you love enough to do data analytics for? Who do you love enough to do sales calls for? Who do you love enough, right? And I think that's also true for podcasting. Who do you love enough to go through all of the infrastructure and management and coordination and technical things and marketing and all that stuff? Who do you love enough to do that for? And once that answer is there, so much that is difficult becomes a little bit easier, or at least you have more ease with it. Because on those days when those Saturdays where I'm like, oh, my kids are at German school and I just want to, I don't know, eat ice cream or something, right? I will think about myself at 29, convinced I don't belong and I'm not good enough, hiding in a bathroom, crying. When in reality, now at 43, I look back on my 29-year-old and I'm like, girl, not only did you belong, but you were smarter than 80% of people in that room. And that's why they talked over you. That's why. And then I record or I prepare for a podcast.
Yeah, good for you. And I like that way of looking at your ideal client or ideal listener or whatever you want to call them. Yeah, asking yourself the question, who do you love enough? That's one I've never heard before. It's a really, really good question to ask. And yeah, I also completely agree with you. That's the advice I always give too, to look at your podcast as if it were a business, because you have to basically have a business plan for your podcast also. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Yeah. And the mess and everything that you mentioned is very very similar. So yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So yeah, and what you were saying earlier about some business coaches giving the advice, oh, start a podcast and the clients will come dropping from the sky, and no. No, but if you love it, then it's amazing. Yeah. But
right.
Maybe it's not for everyone. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I've just seen so many people think that they would start a podcast and then somehow but I see this in online business as well. People are like, create your online business in 5 hours. I'm like, who's 5 hours? Like the 5 hours on Neptune? Maybe. I don't know. But here on Earth, I got news for you. It does not work that way.
No.
Like, there's a reason why entrepreneurs go in and out of being an entrepreneur and being fully employed. Because at this point, if I was fully employed, I would be working less.
Yeah.
And then someone would just pay me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to worry about taxes. I wouldn't have to worry about all that other stuff. But who do I love enough? I love my women in tech.
Yeah.
My women in tech who are thinking, I don't think I belong.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I'm just supposed to be stressed out. Maybe I should quit. And I'm like, hey, babes, hi.
Yeah.
You not only belong, but we desperately need you. And you can probably cut 2, 5, 10 hours out of your work week and get yourself down to like a nice, 45 hours a week and enjoy time off and feel creative. And guess what? Then you're going to get the promotion. Then you're going to get the pay increase. Then you're going to get the mentorship that you require.
Yeah.
Like that's so exciting. I know it sounds kind of weird, but like when I see an exhausted woman in tech who's thinking of giving up, I'm like, oh, I love you. Come here. I got you.
Oh yeah. No, but I can relate. But still, even in those times when I'm feeling if I would go back working in an office, I would work less and earn more. But on the other hand, I've never been this happy in my life. So
Yep.
So who do you love enough is also me, myself, and I. Yeah. to keep doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because 2023 has been was really, really hard. So women in tech got impacted 65% more than men during the layoffs globally. And there were times where I was like, what? What am I doing? What am I doing? Big conferences got canceled, like all kinds of Women Who Code just went bankrupt and is no longer available. Um, and then I remember yesterday for an hour, I went to my daughter's school and I listened to their presentations about food that I should try. And I tried a chocolate covered cricket and it was great. It was really yummy. Or I've never missed one of my son's football games,
Yeah.
soccer games. For Americans, it's soccer. I still say
Yeah.
football because I think like a German. But I've never missed one. And when I was still an executive, a global consultant on the road, I missed so much that
Yeah.
I will never get back. I will never get to have those experiences. I missed them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And what you have now is, that's priceless, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. So let's keep doing it, huh?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right. One more question, because I also want to keep going with this podcast, so I need more guests. Can you recommend anyone that I can invite to be a guest?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So Cami Gildner has a
Yeah.
great podcast. There's somebody that I think would be just incredible. And if you want me to introduce you, I can do emails and all that stuff. Her name is Yo Canny. She has a podcast called Girl Take the Lead. It is such a delight. And then the other person that might be of interest is she's actually also in our group is Michelle Mazer, because
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
both her podcasts. Yeah. Yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah, she has two. She has the Make Marketing Suck Less, which I love, and then she does a co-hosting with someone else, and that's called Duped.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. They're both great. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're both really good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So she's on my list because she did not respond yet to my post in the Podcast Marketing Academy community, but I really want her on the show. So
Yeah. I really, I
Yeah.
really enjoy that.
Yeah.
And then there is somebody that I don't know him. Do you know who Ramit Sethi is?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would love to know why he does what he does.
All right. Yeah.
He says that he does it because he wants to bring down like the discomfort in talking about money.
Yeah.
I think that there's a subversive thing happening there. I do.
Okay.
I think something bigger than
All
that
right.
is happening.
Okay. I haven't listened to his podcast yet, but I've seen the Netflix series. So that's putting the bar really high to get someone like that on the show. That would be just like saying, "Oh, just ask Stephen Bartlett to come on." Yeah.
I'm super interested in why he does it though.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah,
it's
me too. Yeah, and actually, Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO is on my list, but I haven't been brave enough to ask yet.
I feel you on that one.
Yeah.
I have someone that I would love to bring on to my podcast, and I also hold off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will see. I will start on the first names you mentioned, and then
And really, like if I can introduce you to Yo, let me know.
Okay, yeah, that would be great, because of course I would send an email or a DM on Instagram or something, but yeah, it's always nice if you get introduced by someone. Yeah.
Okay, let me put it onto my to-do list, because if this brain does not write it down, this brain does not hold on to it.
I can relate, but also it's not really urgent because I'm taking a recording break in July and August, so probably will be for after the summer. But
okay, I'll connect you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. And also, thank you for this really fun and interesting conversation we had. And thank you for your time. And I wish you all the luck in the world with everything else that you're gonna do and your podcast. And maybe someday, you never know, write another book. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be fun. My first full-length book. And I'll
Yeah.
see you at the PMA. I'll see you around.
Yes, we
All
will.
right.
Yeah. So thank you. Bye bye. Zo, die zit er weer op. Dankjewel voor het luisteren. Ik ben heel blij dat jij erbij was. En als je geen enkele nieuwe aflevering wil missen, volg dan deze podcast. En als je mij en mijn gast een heel groot plezier wil doen, dan maak je ons heel blij met het geven van 5 sterretjes in Spotify of een leuke review op Apple Podcasts of waar dat je ook luistert. En we vinden het ook altijd heel leuk om van jou te horen, dus stuur ons gerust een berichtje. Alle contactgegevens en linkjes staan in de show notes. Tot de volgende!